It's so nice to be with both of
You're
you.
so pretty.
What's that?
You're so pretty.
I am? Oh, that's nice of you to say. Thank you. Um, uh, this is called Family in Six Tones. As you know, it is like, and I'm telling this to viewers, not just you, a refugee mother and an American daughter. And this was so beautifully written. Your words, you are, I mean, both of you are amazing writers, but do I pronounce it Lan or Lon? Lan?
Lon. Lon.
Lon. Lon, your writing is just, I mean, both, now I feel like I'm being rude to you, Harlan, but anyway, your writing is so gorgeous. And I like kept, I was searching in my bedside table for a pen so I could underline some of the things that you said. But anyway, why don't you guys tell listeners what this book is about and also what inspired you to even sit down and do this memoir and to do it together?
So the publishing house actually approached us for it because they had heard an NPR interview that was released on the Tet Offensive that had actually been recorded years before, where I would ask her questions about her time in Vietnam. And by the time it came out, I was about 15, 16. So she had a lot of connections there from her first two books. So they contacted us and they said, I think, Harlan's of age now. Maybe we could make this like a coming of age book that also links to themes of immigration. So obviously my mother, her first two books are greatly based on like the war, but to have two people, it's important to have both of us because I think it created more of like a general, something like most people can relate to on some level. It's not just something totally separate because it's also about growing up under completely different circumstances. Also, how the immigration experience affects the family and how the family affects the next generation's life, I think.
And what was it like collaborating on this project together?
It was unstable. It was I wish I could say it was cathartic, but I think during the time when we were going through it, it was very turbulent for us because, it's hard to collaborate with another person, even if you're writing non-personal stuff. Like I do a lot of legal writing, and I have many, many legal articles, and only one was a collaboration. And, it's hard because you have to take the other person's point of view into consideration. But when it's something so personal, and especially between a mother and daughter, when sort of the wires are there that connect us, but they can also fray very easily, and electricity is conducted through the wire, and sometimes it feels like the insulation part of the wire somehow dissipated, and we're just now, frying each other. So it was hard because we had to decide what to include, what not to include. And also Harlan wanted to include things I didn't want to include, and we had to come up with a compromise. And the reason why we came up with a compromise was because I felt like it's her first experience writing. So I didn't want to silence her, even though she wanted to write about things that were hard for me to write about. So in the end, everything that's on the page was a product of a back and forth. And we also didn't even write together. It was very hard, right, Harlan, to write in the same space. We were totally separate, and we only came together towards the end to read it. Because at first we read each other's and it was explosive. Yeah.
Yeah. We only read each other's stuff at the end when we had to. Like, it was a requirement. And I could tell that she came to me and she would tell me, like, okay, it's time to read each other's stuff. And she seemed like scared to tell me because it was already difficult for me. I think at the time when I got the book deal, they wanted it to be greatly centered around my mom's like previous two books, meaning like the brand is about talking about the war, but I don't have a lot to say about it except for what it's done to my life. You know what I mean? Like, I can't speak for everybody. I don't want to sound entitled or anything. And I also had that mindset of like a teenager of like, well, I have so much more I want to say, so why can't I say that? So then when I agreed to direct it all toward a theme, and then on top of it, she was nervous to write about certain stuff, it made me upset because I felt like I was in a box. Like, I couldn't, there's only like one thing I could write about, and that's so hard to expand in an interesting way, because I never imagined I'd be writing for like adults. You know what I mean? Even though kids don't really read anymore, which is really sad, but it's hard because I'm thinking like probably women, I don't know, I'm not going to guess your age, that's so rude, but like people who are like 20s, 30s.
44. It's okay. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I am fine. I feel I'm at peace with my age. It's okay.
Yeah, like adults, like everybody's read it, and it's not any age that I expected I would ever write for when I was little, thinking I was a writer. So that definitely brought out like a lot of confusing things for me. So it wasn't just the writing process that made it hard to collaborate. I think we were just totally different parts of our lives. I mean, I'm going through high school. Everything about us is different. I would write at 2 a.m. She would write like throughout the day, little by little. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, are you even speaking to each other? There's like, like I'm like intruded on a family squabble, and I'm just like there was a huge fight before the camera went on, and now you're like pretending like everything's fine. Well, you don't have to pretend for me.
We're in quarantine, so we're stuck. She's doing her college online, so you can imagine it's all pretty eerie.
Wow. And aren't you at UCLA, or did I make that up?
Yes.
Wow. And so they're not letting anybody go.
No, it's actually very depressing for me because I picked UCLA because of like you pick the school because of what it looks like. If you have like two options that are, you know, this kind of the same and like you know, what it'll do for you, I guess the campus was important to me. So I chose UCLA over Berkeley, but now Berkeley moved people in. So
wow,
that sucks. But
UCLA is in a beautiful part of LA. I love LA. You will have the best time. This time will pass. It's a blip. You will get there. It was the right decision. Don't second guess. I took a writing class at UCLA right after I graduated from college, and my husband always makes fun of me when we drive by it because we spend a lot of time in LA now where he works, or he used to work anyway, and every time we drive by he's like, look, your alma mater, and I'm like, I did not go there. I took one class. I like wrote some essay about, I don't know, my first bra buying experience with my mother, and anyway, that does not make me an alum of there, but thank you. Anyway, well, I know it's a really tricky time for everybody. Do you really feel that was so sad to hear you say that nobody reads anymore? Do you really feel like none of your friends read?
Not really. I mean, we like to get information very fast. A lot of kids nowadays, it's insane, have like ADHD and stuff. So from like the technology, because I think like it all bleeds into one, like it's been shown like phones might cause like ADHD or something. So a lot of kids, they don't have the attention span. They prefer like, I guess, movies and short articles, or like a lot of the news that we get now is on social media, and the social media page will like give it to you as quickly as possible, like 5 words, and then that's it.
That's a little disheartening.
The only time that we really do read a lot, I can't speak for I'm talking about like the people that I know.
I get it.
Right. We will read if there's some, like, do you remember The Fault in Our Stars, for example? Yeah. The movie came out, right? And then everyone's like, okay, I'll read it now because it's like trendy. So that's when someone would read, I guess.
That's very disheartening and depressing for me because when I first arrived in this country, my only solace was books. And I just feel like, you know, that's why I wanted Harlan, let's say, to love music, because I feel like music and books are things that you can always turn to when other things that are not within your control are upside down. And because there will always be something you can't control that hurt you. It could be a person, it could be a wider event, and you can always go to that part that is the music part, the book part. You can immerse yourself in a different world. So if you don't have that, it just seems, but maybe they're different and they don't need that, but it just seems very different for me. That was my solace. And I was just hooked on things like 1001 Arabian Nights because it exposed me to distant shores.
Yeah.
And it's also like a form of traveling too,
I completely agree, especially now, especially in the very beginning of the pandemic when we literally could not leave our house at all for week after week after week. I feel like, oh, well, look at this. Now I'm having coffee and a glass of wine on a terrace in Tuscany. And now I'm here I am in China in this little apartment. I feel like books could take me everywhere. And I totally agree with you. No matter what you're going through, you can just open up a book and you're immediately somewhere else. It's this empathy and escape. So that makes me sad. But I bet there's a way. Well, now this will be my new mission of how to get, because I also love social media. I'm I have to get myself off Instagram with a hook, but there has to be a way to keep that writerly escapist.
Well, there's Instagram reviews of books, and I hope that will work, for the youngsters.
Yes. Well, hopefully this podcast will change everything, Yeah. That's, I do, and I try really hard. I hadn't been targeting, young people necessarily, not that I'm so old, but that hadn't been my mission. It was more just to keep people reading who are already reading or who miss reading because life is so crazy. But I think books are so, I just think they're the coolest, and I think everybody should be doing it. But anyway, all right, well, I'll tackle that, tomorrow. But back to your book, because some of the stories in here, and Lon, I just wanted to talk to you about being 13 and having to leave your country and coming over here just with a family friend and finally realizing that you weren't going back and watching Saigon fall in 1975 and the whole thing, and how you kind of picked yourself back up. How do you recover from something like that? How do you deal with that separation from family and home and homeland and just go about your business? How does that work, and maybe this is your way, right? Still writing about it and everything, but tell me a little more about that.
I think that my parents had two different approaches. My father was always telling me, it seemed paradoxical what he said, because there's the one statement has a paradox within it. Remember what's important and forget it immediately. So just don't focus on the past. And yet I find that is a very hard thing for me to do, because my mother was always dwelling on the past. And as I read more, I hear things by Faulkner, like the past is never even past, it's not dead, it's not even past. So there's always the past, and I don't think that one really recovers. Just like if you have a death in a family of somebody very close, it's not like, yes, you will move on, but it's not like that part is not forever inside of you. So the notion of losing something, of having the rug be yanked out from under you because you never expected certain things to happen, they were very spectacular. They took a very spectacular form for me, because suddenly leaving the country and starting anew in high school was spectacularly different. But I think it helps me to compartmentalize, to just do this and this and this, but never really recovering, because I know that I can be easily brought back. I feel sometimes like when I'm walking my dog and I had a retractable leash, and I feel like I am the dog, and anybody actually can just press that button on that leash and it will bring me back, let's say to 75 or 68, even though it looks like I'm farther away now, and there's this leash that takes me farther away from that part, but can be brought back very easily. And it'll be startling for me, because I would think I had been thinking to myself, I'm farther away from that now, and how did I get back so easily to that vulnerable spot again? What did you say?
How did you recover?
Never recover. Just sort of, move on to the next thing or doing the next thing, but it's not really a recovery. Because I know when I'm, let's say even when I'm dealing with Harlan, if I know that the way I parent her is very much based on that experience that I have not recovered from, right? Let's say I'll push her to always do well in school. And maybe all parents do that, but I think mine is more urgent. And I feel very much like if she were to lose everything, one thing that nobody can take away from you because it's inside you is your education, right? So yeah, you know, the fire can come and burn down your house. You can lose all of your possessions. You can lose everybody you love. But if you have your education, right, it is the foundation that is portable and it's not geographically anchored towards any place. So while education maybe for other parents can be, well, this is a way for you to move forward in life. Mine is, yes, of course, but it also has this kind of no one can take it from you feeling, which I felt happened when, you know, our life was taken from us and we had to start a new one. So that in that sense, I can see how the fact that I've never really recovered even affects something like the emphasis I place on certain things for her, which can be very frustrating for her because she does not have that experience.
How do you feel about that, Harlan?
Well, I've always been very conscious of, well, I think it's just because I'm really interested in psychology and people. So when I was really little, from a really young age, I figured out that my mom parented because of her experience. So it's like, also, you know, it's very easy to call her like overbearing or, you know, like controlling, which she is sometimes. But it's hard to be angry about it because it comes from like a very innocent place. Like she doesn't mean to do that, you know, like, I'm not saying any mom means to come off as controlling, but she literally can't help herself. And I can tell, like, we'll have a conversation, we're in an argument and we keep talking over each other. And I'm like, can you give me 2 minutes? I'm just going to say something and just be quiet. And she's like sitting on her hands. She can't even like stay still. It's true, but it's not your fault, Mom.
No, but you know, like somebody is stating something, like if they're going to have 2 minutes of conversation and the piece that comes out that follows
she
the
said
first
what
statement,
I say isn't true.
Yeah, so in other words, if
right,
you
but
say
it's
something,
true to me. It's not true to her because she's so defensive. So what I'm trying to get at is that in the past, most of the time, kids can like tell their parents like, this upset me when you did this to me, or like this hurt my feelings. But with my mom, she doesn't want to hear that it hurt my feelings because she's defensive. And people who are defensive don't admit that they're defensive because that's like the first trait. So it's like a thing that goes back and forth. And I know she's not defensive because she sucks as a person. Like she's defensive because she's like, her whole life has been about being on defense. And even when I talk about her being defensive, she doesn't want to hear it either. But it's like totally true when you hear the conversation. Like it's a lot of the time an argument, even about the book, will start at something where, because I don't really try to start the argument. I'm good just being quiet the whole day. Because as the parent, you know, she wants to correct and make sure that I'm good when I leave the house officially and like start my own life. So she'll start a conversation a lot of the time. And even in that conversation, I see like the psychology, like her psychology. And that's not to say like, oh, I'm so much better. Like I'm a kid, but I know so much. No, like that's not what I mean at all. Like, I mean, because we know each other pretty well, I think I can tell where each thing comes from. And I really want to help her. I started in therapy actually when I was like 15 from stuff that was going on in school. But when I was in therapy, you know, the therapist job, you kind of love and you hate your therapist because they like open you up. They like pry you open. And it's it bothered me sometimes. Like I would tell her, she would tell me things like, I'm seeing a pattern and this and that. And I'm like, well, you're obviously like scorekeeping in a hostile way. And I took it as an attack. She was actually just pointing out that I'm just like my mom. And I didn't want to hear that because that's the worst thing possible. Even though she was great.
Hear that. No matter how great your mom might be, nobody ever wants to hear that.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear that. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, so in part, it almost feels like you're fighting, like you have all these natural feelings about your relationship, and yet there's this like invisible thing you're fighting with also, right? You understand it logically, but I feel like emotionally it's hard to really digest, right? Like, your mom had this experience, but still you're annoyed, right?
Yeah.
Right, because I always thought, like, why can't she have the experience and leave me alone? Why can't she just, we talk about it and we suffer through it together, but then she can trust me to live my own life, because I was always resentful of, like, well, she'll expose me to, like, everything that can possibly go wrong, and then she'll show me, like, the saddest parts of the world when we travel, and it's not the saddest parts, like, we go to nice places, but, she'll tell me stories, she'll read me books, she'll make sure I'm really educated, she'll make me into someone who has, like, an adult mindset, but when it comes to my own life, I'm, like, 4 years old suddenly, so it's like this whole, it's very interesting how moms, they always say, like, just go, like, explore, but when it comes to the kid exploring, they're really scared to do that.
That's true.
I don't think I've ever felt like I could relate to both sides of an argument more than I feel right this moment. Like, because I feel like on the one hand, I'm like you, and then I'm like the mom too. I have 4 of my own kids, and so I totally get where you're coming from. It's, as much as you love and want your kids to go off, like, it's like a part of you. It's like your right hand is out there, like, walking around, like, it's like it's a part of you, and you don't mean to necessarily. It's like if you're about to touch the fire, right? You want to grab your hand back. It's just, you do it. It's instinctive. So, and I think coming from a past like yours, Lon, where, you've had all of this really trauma before you were even a teenager, essentially. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot to bring into, like, what should we have for dinner? So, I'm actually amazed that the two of you got this book done now that I've talked to you.
So are all my friends that had to hear about it for 2 years.
Oh my gosh. So does this now make you still want to be a writer, Harlan? Or are you over it now?
I do want to write movies more, because if I'm being honest, like, I think movies are more my thing if I could, like, get up the nerve. And also, like, I really just want to make, like, a lot of money and then give it to a lot of animals.
Okay.
Important to me too. But writing, I would write one by myself. No offense. And maybe, like, one day when I'm older, it'd be really cool to, like, end a career, starting it with a memoir and then ending it with a memoir. So maybe when I'm, like, 60, I'll write about what it was like to write with my mom. That would be cool.
She's very good with conversation, so I think, like, a movie script would be good for her, because it's back and forth.
Yeah, I hate writing description. I hate writing, I like dialogue. I don't like descriptions.
Lon, how did you just write like this from when you first started writing, or did you learn to do it? Because the way you even describe things is so beautiful, and you can tell even the way you speak with all of your analogies, how you think about things in terms of just, like, the beauty and how you can talk about it. I'm trying to find, like, a quote that I had. Of course, now I cannot find it. Let me see if there's, maybe we could talk about your detachment, that your mother, well, actually, that was actually a Harlan passage. Well, never mind. I have passages picked out, and that's because I didn't have the thing. Well, here, I'll just read this one. It might seem strange that being a refugee and being a mother feel so similar to me, but both involve a torturous and lifelong drive in search of home and security, in one case for oneself, in the other even more furiously for one's child. The journey of a refugee away from war and loss toward peace and a new life, and the journey of a mother raising a child to be secure and happy, are both steep paths filled with detours and stumbling blocks. For me, both hold mystery. That's beautiful. I had never heard being a refugee compared to being a mother in quite the same way before, which you do, like, throughout. And tell me a little more about your actual writing, and maybe your novel writing sort of was the practice you needed.
I think I wrote basically because I read, And I love to write because, and I'm not talking about legal scholarship, I like to write because the kind of writing I do for Viking, because it's very unruly. To me, it's like a dreamscape. So even in this book, which is very much based on our lives, it is the stuff that is underneath the surface that I'm interested in. So a lot of times when you write, even a memoir where you know things that happened already, I feel very much like I enter into a world that I normally don't enter in my awake life. So it's like going to sleep and you dream. You can never tell yourself what dream you're going to dream. And the act of writing is very similar to me. It unravels, it unspools, and it taps into a part of the self that is a little bit more of the unconscious digestion of what happens in the surface of daily life. And I think that from having read so much, it helps me to write. Because I didn't take a writing course per se. You know, it's just like if you read, you just know what works for you. And in many ways, writing is very similar to other forms of creativity. So for example, Harlan likes to watch movies, but also when I watch movies, I see, and this helps me with writing, I see the angle of the camera, or I see how the director maybe places an object, which maybe recur in the next scene. So these are devices that are very helpful when you're trying to construct the story. In the movie, it's visual. In writing, it's less visual. But we all use the same device, right? Which is a premonition, a foreshadowing, recurring images, and I combine that with more of the dreamscape.
Wow. So, if both of you would give advice to aspiring authors, what would you say?
I would say that it helped me when I first started, that I knew nothing about the business. So having that beginner's, I remember there's a book I love called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And a lot of times we think of knowledge as something we accumulate, and the more, the better. But sometimes removing excess is also really good. Things that are just baggage. And I think knowing too much actually about something can be a hindrance, because it makes you feel overwhelmed, and then you don't get to the core. And if the core is I want to write, then you should just write and not worry about the next step. So shedding knowledge actually for me was good for writing, because if I had known how complicated the business is, I don't think I would have had the innocence.
I guess when someone writes, it's important to understand that, like, I can only speak for like the memoir, like fiction or something, right? Like not research, but you're writing just about life. And when you write about your own life, or you write about an ordinary life, it is not superhero or something like that. It's something that is possible for everybody to go through. Like, every book is really just about different human relationships, and everybody's going to experience that at one point or another. It's just like your job is just to say it in a way that's like aesthetically pleasing, that people like to read about. So just to try to keep as much like relatability as much as possible, and remember that even though your writing is different and you're talking about something different, you are very similar to everybody else.
You have to have something universal. And I think all human yearnings are universal. So when you write about your yearning and how it relates to the world, I think that it will create that connection with the reader, which is what you want to do, because, you know, writing is so solitary. You're just writing by yourself, and it feels very, very disconnected sometimes. But if you know that there is this connection you're going to make, then it's very helpful.
Well, I can tell you, I felt like super connected to both of you, having read this and hearing your innermost thoughts and how like literary they were, and you know, your anger and your like, you know, like it's great. It's really good stuff. And then to be able to chat with you is
thank
really
you so much, Zibby.
So thank you, Family in Six Tones. This is thank you so much for all of your time, and I hope that you two can.
We have such a busy schedule.
We'll follow you on your Instagram too. Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay. All
right. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.